happened was that the Medicine Buddha was someone that also looked at reality and said, okay, how can I see the things around me that can support me in developing that awareness? And so the Medicine Buddha looked at diet, exercise, hygiene, the stones around him, the fauna and the flora around him, and understood every single aspect of nature and how we can ecologically and sustainably support ourselves and to support the world around us. That's what the Medicine Buddha was about. And these teachings became transmitted over time until they became what we are familiar with. Some of you may have heard the term Ayurveda. Anybody familiar with the term Ayurveda? Okay, Ayurveda is the science of life. It's a Sanskrit term. This basically has to do with understanding life and knowing how to take care of oneself. So these transmissions happened not only in terms of medicine, but also there were meditations that were taught. Now, in terms of the mandala, what's very important to understand about mandalas is that the Tibetans have an expression that actually is kind of like a greeting every day. And rather than say, how are you? One of the phrases that they use basically translates as, how is your mandala shining? How is your mandala shining? Okay? Because there's a recognition within the Buddhist tradition that we are basically good, that we each have what's called Tathagata, or basically enlightened awareness. We have that potential. We can transform those three poisons. And so what you're looking at is a mandala is not only representative of who we are as a state of being, but a mandala also represents the stages and processes that we develop in ourselves to attain enlightenment. So each one of the directions, each one of the colors in this mandala represents a different level of awareness. You have different colors in the four quadrants. This is designed like an Indian palace, okay? And the palace represents the body. If you were actually to take the mandala from the center and pull it up, it would it's like a accordion up, okay? Some of you may have heard of something called a stupa. A stupa is basically a three-dimensional representation of the body of the Buddha and the body of enlightenment. A mandala is actually a three-dimensional representation squashed down into 2 dimensions. But it's really a 3-dimensional representation. So the directions have to do with different levels of compassion that each one of us needs to develop in the process of our own awakening. And the kind of wisdom that is necessary. We need a kind of wisdom that is a peaceful kind of wisdom, represented by one of what are called the Dhyani Buddhas. That kind of wisdom is peaceful and tries to understand things in that kind of way. Then there is another Buddha that is representative of education. Sometimes we just can't live peacefully. We need to be taught how to live peacefully. And so there's one Buddha whose responsibility it is to teach us how to understand what it takes to develop our awareness. So it's about education. The direction that's red here has to do with essentially discriminating awareness that we need to develop. We need discrimination, but we also need to be able to, in some ways, give up those things which are harmful to ourselves and be attracted to or develop an attraction to those things which support us. So this has to do with understanding that and sort of in some ways being attracted from the dark side, okay, of our nature. And finally, the green side, which is actually representative of the north. You have the east, you have the south, you have the west, and you have the north. North is represented by green. And green is about an all-accomplishing kind of wisdom that understands that sometimes what you need to do is be strong enough to know what you need to push away and what you need to pull towards yourself. Sometimes there are things that we have to say no to, okay? We don't necessarily, there's some things we can't negotiate. And sometimes you have to put your foot down and say, you cannot do this. It's kind of a wrathful type of awareness that a mother has. A mother has that when their child is about ready to touch the stove, and the mother has to swat the child's hand. And is the mother being aggressive? No, the mother's protecting the child. Okay? And then you apologize to the child and you try to explain. But initially, it seems wrathful, it seems harsh, but it's necessary. So there's an aspect of understanding that in ourselves, if we transform ignorance, attachment, and aggression, we become resourceful in all sorts of ways. Now, in the history of the Medicine Buddha, there were 7 other historical Medicine Buddhas. The one that's yellow in this one corner is representative of the Buddha Sakyamuni. But there were also 7 other Medicine Buddhas, and the one, like the vase in the back here, is representative of the teachings of the Medicine Buddha, that when you learn the meditations of the Medicine Buddha, you begin to understand how to take care of yourself better. That's the idea behind it, okay? The Medicine Buddha is not here to save you from somewhere else, okay? That's not the job of a Buddha. The job of a Buddha is to educate you, to give you the power that's already inside you. And that once you begin to learn, and there are meditations, and the monks have been reciting the mantra of the Medicine Buddha. That's what they're doing right now, okay? And that mantra of the Medicine Buddha it creates a great vibe, okay? But really what's going on is, as they recite those mantras, they are also transforming inside themselves. They are accessing their wisdom and their compassion through the access of that mantra. Now, so we have the representation of the whole path that the Medicine Buddha went through. We have aspects that represent the kind of qualities that a Buddha has. And then there are these things which are symbolically representative of the things that support our enlightenment and our growth. For example, you see these little garlands, okay, these little white dots that are around here, and little colored dots that are here. These have to do with gems. They have to do also with musical instruments, that there are sounds and there are colors that are very pleasing to us, that support us, okay? We want to be in a harmonious environment. This is a very harmonious environment. What mandalas do is they use sacred geometry and create a way in which we find ourselves going deeper and deeper inside ourselves to transform. So you have the palace, which would actually be this, be going up. There are the walls that are here. There are the garlands that are at the top that are a support between the roof of the mandala, or the house where the Buddha sits, and the walls that are part of the palace that the Buddha sits in, okay? Then you have these lotus patterns that are out here. This lotus pattern that is out here is representative of the fact that our minds are always pure. Okay, again, the idea is within Buddhism, we have the notion that we are basically good. We are happiest when we see other people happy. We're not particularly happy when we just get every selfish ambition that we want. Most of us actually find that when we see our child happy or our partner happy, that we seem to be much more content and at peace than we're just basically getting what we want ourselves. So in some ways, we might act selfishly based on the 3 poisons. But in reality, what makes us happiest is when we are extending ourselves to others. And these lotuses are representative of that nature which does not change. It does not change. On the outside of that, you have these little yellow vajras. Vajra can mean a thunderbolt or an adamantine scepter. And what these are actually is, according to the tradition, is that when a being attains full enlightenment, there is a quality that is there that is impenetrable, okay? We know, for example, what we see in ourselves is that when we are feeling strong inside ourselves, our immune system goes up, okay? And then when we're feeling and we're caught in the 3 poisons of ignorance, attachment, and aggression, then what ends up happening is our immunity crashes, we get sick, we have all sorts of things go on. What would it be like if you lived in a state where when you were in your zone of clarity and peace, that was something that was just your nature that didn't change? What would that be like? And that's really what Buddhist practice is about. And the idea of these vajras, or dorjes in the Tibetan, is to represent the idea that the Buddha that sits inside you, the enlightened being that sits inside this palace, his enlightenment is impenetrable. It doesn't change. Then outside, you have these flames. These are flames that are representative of the flames that burn away negative emotional states. I don't know how many of you saw the story, the movie, The Little Buddha with Keanu Reeves, okay? All right? And there's an image at the end where you see him sitting somewhere, and there are all these arrows that are flying to try to attack him, and there's a field of energy around him that transforms every arrow into a flower, okay? It's great cinematography. But the idea is that that's what this is representative of. There's nothing in terms of ignorance, attachment, and aggression. There's no jealousy, no harm, no hate. And we know this in ourselves. When we are in a more awakened state, the kind of garbage that people say about us doesn't really bother us. When we're feeling vulnerable, then suddenly someone says something, we all go to pieces, okay? So when we are stronger in our selves, and when we have that quality of certainty and good-heartedness, then what other people say really doesn't matter all that much. And that is represented by this outside area. Now, what's interesting about the story of the Buddha is the Buddha did not sort of like ascend and disappear as an enlightened being as if he was an immortal. Okay, the Buddha went through birth, sickness, old age, and death. And the idea was a teaching for all of us. And this is part of also what I was talking about originally with respect to the Four Noble Truths, where suffering is there, and that suffering is a result of our craving. Our craving makes it so that we don't understand the nature of impermanence. We want to be forever 21, or so we think, all right? And in that situation, what happens is, as a result of clinging on to something like that, things get more and more problematic in our lives. So we have to understand the nature of impermanence, the changing nature of things, which also means that things come and things go. And the idea is also that, for example, the reason why different Buddhas come at different times is that there are periods of history where what happens is the light gets slightly dimmer. Doesn't go out altogether, but it gets dimmer. And it gets dim, and then what happens is the strength of that Buddha field begins to diminish, at which point another enlightened being comes and begins to bring that energy back up again. Okay? So for example, we are during the time of the fourth historical Buddha, but there's also the fifth historical Buddha, the Buddha Maitreya, that has said that it'll come in a period of time in the future. So what we see is that what we're looking at is we have to let go. We have to let go of our expectation. We have to let go of trying to hold everything. There was one great teacher, a Buddhist teacher by the name of Chogyam Trungpa, and he said, you can't eat the sunset. Or in the same way, and we all know this, we go to a great restaurant one night, and then we say, well, this is so fantastic, I'm going to go tomorrow night. And tomorrow night is not as good as the night before. And that's the way it goes. Because things have changed. You've changed. Everything has changed. And so what the monks do is they do a ceremony recognizing the impermanent nature of all phenomena. Of course, what we might want to do, we may have pictures that we're going to preserve. We may take pictures of this and put us on the wall. Okay. But the idea is eventually, even those will get deleted off your camera. You might move and lose the picture. And all of that is representative of how can we just let go of these things? Because in letting go of those things rather than trying to make them into institutions of how it exactly has to be. We open up to the possibility of continually awakening. And that's what enlightened beings want you to do. They want you to wake up. They don't want you to join an organization and become a card-carrying member, okay? That's not the deal. The deal is, how do you continue to wake up? And so at the end, there's actually a saying in Buddhism which I've really taken to heart, and this is from my own teacher. He says, a good teacher is someone who rows you to the other shore and then burns your boat. And the idea is you have to figure out how to get back. And as a result, these monks demonstrate they're going to burn this boat. That's what they're going to do. They're going to give you sand as a reminder of what it's about. And the idea is, can you take the lessons you learned from watching this display and take them home and begin to developing them in your lives, rather than this just being one more thing on your bucket list? Okay? So that's basically an explanation of Buddhism in a mandala in 10 minutes or 15 minutes.